Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Letting Library Lecture Series named They Came Over the Barlow Trail. My name is Linda Carr, and today we will meet three legends of Milwaukee history who took the journey from the Mississippi River and beyond to find new opportunities in a new land. Stay away from that thing. Today we will learn about where they are from, why they left, and their experiences on the trail and their contributions to Milwaukee, the state, and the nation. We have wonderful sponsors allowing us to provide this program, which I need to tell you about. The Milwaukee Museum. Look, 2020 and most of 2021 have been difficult for the Milwaukee Historical Society, the owners and operators of the Milwaukee Museum. We miss being out in the public and seeing our visitors and sharing the great history of past and present to our community. I just want everyone to know, thanks to in part to the support of the City of Milwaukee, Milwaukee Museum is fiscally strong, here to stay, and is open Saturdays 1 to 5. However, we always appreciate your support. Many of you came to our performance at the museum and the Porch Fest events and have seen our booths at the Carefree Sunday and the duck races. We look forward to bringing you more events when they are available. We want to thank our donors and corporate members for their continued support. Milwaukee Historical Society obtains its income from donations and membership. To become an individual member only costs $20 a year, and it supports our building and most of our activities. If you enjoy the programming, please think about joining. The City of... bear with me. Letting Library. One of the great sponsors we have this evening is Letting Library. The new Letting Library had a soft opening January 7th, 2020, celebrated its grand opening on January 11th, and those first 5 days, the community embraced the new library with over 5,600 people coming through the doors, checking out over 11,000 items. Then COVID-19 hit, affecting all aspects of life throughout the country, and the Letting Library closed its doors to the public on March 15th, 2020. The library is now open, fortunately. You do need to wear masks, and it's limited hours, but you can go in there and browse, which I do probably 3 times a week. Throughout this pandemic, the library staff has provided service to its patrons in different ways, from making it possible to pick up library materials to offering programs online. Check library website for services. We want to give a shout out to the Friends of the Letting Library who have continued to support our efforts throughout the pandemic, making it possible to offer free books to our community partners. Become today a member of the Friends of the Letting Library. City of Milwaukee invites you to contribute your ideas and ask questions about projects at a time that works best for you on the new Engage Milwaukee platform. Visit Engage Milwaukee, Oregon to learn about this new way to engage online. I have joined, and there are a variety of topics to discuss with discussion boards, surveys, and other fun interactive items. This is a great way to share your opinion about upcoming projects, improvements, and designs. Not only does it help make decisions for our great city, it's an easy way to be involved. It's also fun. The Willamette Falls Studio. They're the people that are filming today. The Willamette Falls Studio's mission is to inspire lifelong learning, advance knowledge, and define communications through digital media technology to educate and strengthen communities. Their professional staff work daily to create media content for local organizations, capture city projects, consult on productions, customize broadcast systems, and provide technical support. The staff at WFS work with all levels of experience in media production. Any resident of the 5 service areas can learn how to be a WFS producer at little or no out-of-pocket cost. All they require is a playback of your final project on the public channel. Come in and talk to the staff about how they can help you with your communication needs. Essentially, WFS provides residents with a porthole into their community. Through televised local government meetings and community-produced programming, coupled with the training to create and share their views, residents have a unique opportunity to not only access the community's global perspective, but to also help shape it. They are here filming today, so watch Channel 30 on your Comcast cable, or check your Milwaukee Heritage Channel on YouTube to see the program again. A lot of words here, guys. We'll get to the program shortly. Before I introduce our guests, I want everybody to understand that history is sometimes really murky at best. Milwaukee Museum believes it's extremely important to tell the stories of our city from all perspectives, and our goal is to inform the public of the whole story, all the good, all the bad, and all the ugly of the settlement the West created. Milwaukee's history from all perspectives is important to understand, observe, and recognize, as commemorating 175 years of the Barlow Trail is an important part of our nation, state, and Milwaukee's histories. We recognize that Milwaukee land was inhabited by Clackamas people until fur traders, missionaries, and white settlers introduced diseases that decimated the Clackamas. Their population declined from an estimated population of 4,650 in the year 1805 to 78 by the year 1853. We recognize the Donation Land Claim Act of 1850 prompted homestead settlement in the Oregon Territory for an unsurveyed land to select claims without regard to legal subdivision, allowed white men to owe them 320 acres if single and 640 acres if married. We recognize that the donation land claim forced the native populations to leave their ancestral lands and be placed into reservations. Black people and single women were excluded from the right to own property. We also recognize the 175 years of existence of the Barlow Trail as white settlers began a long and unforgiving journey near the Mississippi River, following the Oregon Trail, many taking the Barlow Trail to enter Oregon City to settle lands and to begin an expedition of hard work, dedication, and forming the West into a part of the United States. And in conclusion, Milwaukee benefited and prospered from settlers coming over the Barlow Trail, like Henderson Llewellyn, Mary Campbell Llewellyn, and Lot Whitcomb, bringing fruit trees and industry to not only Milwaukee but to the West. Without further ado, let's meet our guests. First is Henderson Llewellyn.
I was born on April 23rd, 1809 in North Carolina. I lived to be 69 years old and died in 1878. I came west on the Oregon Trail from Salem, Iowa, and created the fruit industry on the West Coast.
Second is Mary Campbell Llewellyn.
Thank you, Linda. I was born in 1834 and died in 1919. I came from Chester, Massachusetts. My father was Hector Campbell, and I married Henderson's son, Alfred.
Oops. Last but not least is Lot Whitcomb.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together, children of all ages, and stand up and clap for the world's famous Lot Whitcomb. I was born in 1806 and died in 1857. I came from Chicago and created this whole darn town and made everyone here famous.
Thank you, Lot. Let's get a little background from our guests, shall we? Henderson, where were you born, and what did you do in Salem, Iowa?
While I was born in North Carolina, my family moved to Indiana when I was around the age of 13. My family and I were really involved in the Quaker faith. The Quaker life means that we believe God's presence exists in everyone. We also practice pacifism, or as others would say, turn the other cheek. By 1835, my brother William and I started our nursery business of growing fruit trees and harvesting fruit for a living. By 1838, I had moved our orchard to Salem, Iowa, along with my wife and 4 children, including Mary's future husband. In addition to the nursery business, I found another passion: abolition, or the right of black people to be free from slavery. Because of this, I joined the separatist movement and was subsequently rejected by the Quaker elders. This did not break my spirit, though, as I created 2 underground railroad houses with a tunnel between them in Salem, Iowa. I used those houses to help runaway slaves to get to Canada, where they could live their lives as free people. One of my Salem, Iowa homes is now a museum, if you would like to go and visit it.
Very impressive, Henderson. Mary, where were you born?
I was born in Chester, Massachusetts, to Hector and Olive, my father and mother. My father, Hector, was a school teacher there during the winter months and a farmer during the spring through fall. When my grandfather, George Soule, a Mayflower descendant, died, we moved to New York for a short time. I was the 10th child out of 11 in the family. My father, Hector, was also elected twice to the Massachusetts State Legislature between 1838 and 1848. Both of my parents are buried in the Milwaukee Pioneer Cemetery.
Thank you, Mary. I know you were young when your family crossed the Oregon Trail.
Enough, Linda. Time to get to me.
Yes, Mr. Whitcomb, I know it's your turn. Where were you born? And tell us about your life before the Oregon Trail.
Finally! I was born in Vermont and moved to Michigan around 1840. But in Chicago, I was famous. Did you know I helped build the Chicago Canal? Some even call it the Chicago River nowadays. Well, that made me famous and rich. Famous enough to be elected to the Illinois State Legislature. But alas, my darling wife Irene suffered from asthma. Irene and I, with our 4 children, moved to St. Louis for her health. Then I got this pamphlet about West, and
Please, Mr. Whitcomb. We'll talk to all our guests why they left their homes to come to Oregon, which leads us to a great segue. Henderson, why did you leave Salem, Iowa to come to Oregon?
Well, many of the stories of my life have a little fiction and a little truth in them. The fiction is that the Underground Railroad made the Missouri militia very nervous, and that 3 days before they were to come and to my home, I packed up my belongings and started to head west to avoid being caught and killed. But the fact is pretty simple. I read pamphlets about Lewis and Clark's survey of the wonders of the West, and I read about free land in the Willamette Valley, so I decided I needed to go. So I spent 2 years preparing for the trip. I made 4 wagons for the journey and gathered over 700 fruit trees to take with me. I believe the West would provide a place to grow my crops and offer me opportunities to explore myself as a human being.
Seems very spiritual, Henderson. Mary, why did you come to Oregon?
I really had no choice. I was only 15 at the time. My father, Hector Campbell, decided that the Depression in the Northeast was enough for us to get away from. Times were tough in the Northeast. You had many new immigrants arriving from England and high tariffs. This put pressures on everybody who owned land, farmed, and finding jobs if they were available. With the promise of the free land out west, my father thought it would be best for us to prosper there.
Thank you, Mary. Lot, why did you come to Oregon?
well, not for spiritualism or because my daddy made me do it. I did it for me, my fame, and for what, of course, I knew I could accomplish. When in St. Louis, I received a pamphlet about moving to the West. Manifest destiny, I think. I knew I could create an empire, a lasting legacy. As a born leader of men and women, I would lead a wagon train of those desperate souls and those seeking fortune out west.
Mr. Whitcomb, Lot, I do promise you we will get back to your Oregon Trail story, but we need to stay on track. Now, Henderson, you left in 1847 for Oregon. What stories do you have about the Oregon Trail?
In the year I spent preparing for the trip, I constructed a large, stout wagon to hold 2 metal boxes, 12 inches deep, and the length of the wagon. Set in the wagon side by side, they filled the box of that wagon. I filled those metal boxes with compost of charcoal and earth, into which I put about 700 trees, embracing all the best varieties and cultivation of that country. The trees were from 20 inches high to 4 feet high, and I protected them from livestock with slats of hickory bolted to posts set around the wagon box. 3 yoke of cattle drew that wagon, which means I had 6 cattle pulling the one wagon. I also constructed 3 other wagons, 2 for the provisions we would need on the journey, and 1 for the goods we would need in Oregon, including shoes, cloth for clothing, and school books for children. I joined up with Lot Whitcomb's wagon train of 147 wagons for a short while, but it eventually split up into a number of smaller wagons groups to allow better access to the pasture and cattle and horses. I found that watering my trees daily to keep them alive took time, and it slowed me down. So I pretty much came over the Oregon Trail by myself. Now, there were many along the way who sought to persuade me to abandon my traveling nursery. They claimed the heavy wagon would kill the cattle and prevent me from completing my trip. To them I replied, as long as it does not endanger the health and life of my family, I will stick to my trees. Another fiction about my Oregon Trail story is that our wagon train was attacked by natives while on the trail, to be suddenly left alone because of the fruit trees in the wagon. But the fact is that we were never bothered by the natives on our trip. Years later, I learned that the reason the natives left us alone on our journey is because they believed the Great Spirit lived in trees. And since they could see the trees from far away, quite a distance, they felt the Great Spirit was traveling with us. I finally arrived in the Oregon Territory in the fall of 1848. About half of my fruit trees survived. I was able to purchase a donation land claim just north of present-day Milwaukee using the shoes and cloth I had brought over the trail with me. I planted my trees in the Oregon soil where they flourished. I understand you now have some sort of a golf course where my orchards once stood? My orchards ensured my fame and fortune in the Oregon Territory.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of work.
Hey, Linda, I was a leader of that wagon train.
Yeah, Lot, please stop interrupting our guests. Thank you. Thank you so much. I promise it will be your turn soon, but I do appreciate your enthusiasm and energy. Mary, can you tell us about your travels over the Oregon Trail?
Thank you, Linda. As you remember, I was only 15 at the time my father, Hector Campbell, decided to leave the trail. My father shipped our belongings around the Cape of Good Hope in South America to meet us there when we arrived. We left in the spring of 1849 and are known as the first family to travel from the East Coast to the West Coast without settling somewhere in between. While the men folk focused on driving the wagons and hunting, I was mainly in charge of cooking, washing clothes, and tending to the sick. Building fires, fetching water, and caring for other passengers was not easy work. Sometimes the women would even stand guard on the trail. Of course, we arrived in the fall of 1849, just in time for the winter rains.
Mary, it certainly does not sound like a cakewalk for women on the trail.
It certainly wasn't. The worst was my mother made me wear my woolen dress and bonnet the whole trip. She said it was important that we maintain our beauty and femininity on the side of the trip. I always had to have my apron ready as to not spill on my dress when doing my chores.
Thank you, Mary. Lot, are you interested in telling your story on the Oregon Trail?
Henderson and I traveled together for a bit until we had to break up that wagon train. Too many pioneers wanted to be led by me. The group I led included names like Powell, who founded Powell Valley, Burkhart, who founded Albany, and Jennings, who founded Jennings Lodge. Now, what do I mean by a leader? I was a wagon captain and led 115 wagons across the plains and into Oregon. I created a system of order, much like a board of trustees is today. I chose other men to run certain components of the wagon trains. One would be in charge of the cattle, one would be in charge of scouting and hunting, and one would be in charge of the camp, and so on. My main job was to lead those wagon trains down the trail and ensure the safety of our passengers. When I traveled over the trail, by most accounts, we all had good relations with the indigenous people who we met along the way. In fact, from 1840 to 1850s, only 25 natives and 35 white settlers were killed in conflict along the trail. Most of the time, we would barter and trade or even ask for their help in leading us down the trail. That attitude changed in the 1850s as an overwhelming number of settlers taking the native lands and traveling to California for the gold rush. I still hate those Californians to this day.
Lot, with all due respect, we are here for the facts, not your personal opinions. Lot, can you tell us what your hardest decision was on the trail?
I remember my saddest day. My 15-year-old son, James, drowned in the river. It was the arrival day into the Oregon Territory. Many people lost their lives on the trail due to what we call cholera. We did not have wood for coffins, so the dead were piled under some rocks, wrapped in some cloth. As you traveled the Oregon Trail, you would see broken down wagons, skeletons of oxen and horses, and piles of rocks with a wood marker for a grave. It always reminded my people of the danger we faced every day on the trail.
Lot, I am so sorry to hear that. But that is a great reminder of the toils, troubles, and the hard journey you settlers faced while coming west. But all three of you made it. Henderson, what did you do once you settled in Milwaukee?
When I arrived in the Oregon Territory, I purchased a donation land claim next to the Willamette River, just north of Lot Whitcomb's donation land claim, where your downtown Milwaukee is now located. William Meek, who was a friend from back east, joined me eventually, and he married one of my daughters. He joined me in a partnership with my son Alfred in the building of orchards from the 350 trees that survived the trip over the Oregon Trail. It was not easy, as we had to clear the land of large fir trees. After 2 years of hard work, Meek and I began selling our nursery trees for $1.50 each. That's about $50 in today's money. By 1851, our orchard produced an annual income of about $15 million in today's money. At the same time, I was founding a spiritualist movement and meeting with radical Quakers who were anti-slave trade and pro-women's right. For those of you who aren't aware, the spiritualist movement provided women at the time with the rare forum to speak in public, and many consider it the start of today's feminist movement. In 1854, after I sold my orchard to my brother Seth and William Meek, Seth went on to develop the Bing cherry, that you should all be familiar with, and the Black Republican cherry. Then I ventured south to Oakland, California to start a new nursery that we called Fruitville, named by my lovely daughter-in-law, Mary. This is what made me famous. And I made an incredible fortune in California, and all the fruit trees in the West Coast can be traced back to the trees I brought to Oregon on my nursery wagon.
Hey, spirit guy. You forgot to tell the audience about those darn hippies in San Francisco couldn't even stand your spiritualism.
Now, Mr. Whitcomb, don't you disrespect my father-in-law. Shame on you.
Yes, Lot, it is true that I left California to start a colony of spiritualists in Honduras, a utopian society of free love dedicated to the Quaker ideals. I bought a ship, and two of my sons, myself, and about 20 other people went to Honduras in 1859. But I quickly came back realizing my dream was not going to materialize. This adventure cost me dearly, as my fourth wife divorced me before I set sail, and my ship wrecked on the way back to California. So I lost virtually all of my fortune and my savings.
Thank you, Henderson, for sharing. And Lot, you should be more respectful of other failings.
Well, you know, I was highly successful and ended in debt. Let me start by...
Stop. Lot. We will get to you, Lot, seriously. But first, it's Mary's turn. Mary, what happened to you after you made it to Oregon?
We arrived in Milwaukee in the fall of 1849, and my father started a tavern.
Well, you're welcome, by the way.
Yes, Lot, I was going to mention that you were giving away free land for settlers here in Milwaukee. My father, Hector Campbell, attained a piece of property and built our tavern there. Now, taverns back then were more than just drinking spots. They were small hotels with rooms above the bar and restaurants below, once the schoolhouse opened.
Well, you know,
As I was saying, Mr. Whitcomb donated the lumber, and Henderson's brother Seth donated the land for the first schoolhouse. My father became the first teacher in Milwaukee. His name is still on an abandoned building here in Milwaukee. You wanted to switch me? I mainly worked the tavern with my mother until I married Henderson's son Alfred in 1851, after Alfred returned from California unsuccessfully looking for gold. We stayed in Milwaukee until 1854 to start the town of Fruitville, outside of Oakland. Cute name, don't you think? There we stayed, having children, raising our family of four, and creating our own nursery empire. By 1878, we moved back to Milwaukee and lived in my father's home. We started the very first library in Milwaukee in 1889. The family tradition carried on as my cousin, daughter of Seth Llewellyn, Florence Olson Letting, gave the land to build our first library.
Mary, what do you think your greatest accomplishment was?
Of course, raising my family, but second is the tradition of the library and starting the town of Fruitville.
Finally, my turn, Jesus. The best for last. And Linda, before you show me the hand, let me just keep going. You all know the song, we built this city. We built this city by Lot Wickham. I think it was a big hit in the 80s at some point in time. At any rate, the Willamette River was the key to Milwaukee being the largest town in Oregon in 1847. Even McLaughlin, that Brit lover, would come to pay homage to this town. Greatest bay Milwaukee Bay was, loved by this boy the moment I laid eyes on it in 1847. First, I had to acquire the land from the fellows that abandoned their cabin on that land. Since Wellers and Beers weren't around, I staked my claim. Then I created the town of Milwaukee and began the mighty empire of Lot Wickham. Forget Portland and Oregon City. This was the place. For those that are wondering, I did name the town after Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Now you see, Milwaukee, back in Wisconsin, means a place to gather a meeting of three creeks to the Native Americans back there. Milwaukee Bay does have three creeks, Johnson Creek, Kellogg Creek, and Spring Creek, which is now buried underground. At any rate, when postmasters were elected, the Democrats and the Whigs would keep changing the spelling from IE to EE, depending on who was in power. We would change our spelling as well. Well, the post office finally decided that it was too messed up and mail was getting sent to the wrong place. So it was determined that Milwaukee, Wisconsin would be EE, Milwaukee, Oregon would be IE. Now, let's get back to me. I started my shipbuilding and lumber empire here, brought in a Canadian Kellogg to build my ships over there at Kellogg Creek, and built my lumber mill at Johnson Creek with Henderson and Meek as partners. Settlers came from thousands of miles and found employment with me. 500 strong we were. Most of those fools went chasing riches in California, but not me. I was smart. I knew supplies would be needed in San Francisco, so I stayed behind and kept Milwaukee a-humming. My steamboats hauled most of the goods from the mouth of Columbia to Portland and to Oregon City. Then my empire grew. San Francisco needed lumber and supplies, and my boats were delivering. Sometimes those stupid Californians didn't have enough money to pay me, so I would bring back those gold seekers vessels back with me. Things got so good, flour was needed, so I built a grist mill here at Spring Creek. It was so busy that a road that I believe we call Highway 43 nowadays, from Tualatin to Milwaukee, to get the wheat to Milwaukee, was built. Of course, I made the shipping barrels as well. Milwaukee was so populated that we had a tin shop, 3 general stores, a blacksmith, and 3 taverns, plus a printing press, where I, Lot Wickham, started our first newspaper called the Western Star. I was never one for politics, as I told the group who elected me postmaster, railroad commissioner, territory representative, Indian advisor, and overall dignitary. All the bigwigs wanted to be like me, but I said, I am who I am, and whom you have chosen as your representative, may you have not made a foolhardy choice. I gave back to this town, gave the material for the first schoolhouse and church. The boys, Llewellyn, Meek, Lambert, and Kellogg, took all our land claims and filed for the formation of the city of Milwaukee in 1865. Man, I was ambitious. We chartered the first syndicate in Oregon. I hired Abernathy to sell our stock. We had the greatest center of commerce in the state and was the first official port of call on the Willamette River. But I lived hard and died young at age 50 in 1857. Although Milwaukee was still the king of shipbuilding, it started to decline. The Portland boys, Kerr and Ainsworth, who incidentally were my captains for my vessels as well, dumped their ship's rock ballast at Ross Island, reducing a ship's ability to get up the river to Milwaukee. Even though I have nothing to prove to you folks, it is obvious, as the town father and pilot in industry, I am the greatest historical figure in Milwaukee, or even for Oregon, for that matter. You can even see my name on the Oregon Senate wall down in Salem. So there you have it, audience. Aren't you glad you stayed to hear my story?
Yes, Lot. Thank you for your colorful, energetic, and boastful comments. This concludes our program for today. I want to thank our sponsors, Leading Library, Willamette Falls Studio, and the City of Milwaukee for making this happen. Remember to watch Comcast Channel 30, our Milwaukee Heritage Channel, for the repeat of this event. I would like to thank our actors, Milo Denham as Henderson Llewellyn, Michelle Hemer as Mary Campbell Llewellyn, and Greg Hemer as himself. Lot Whitcomb. The museum is open inside, and so if you'd like to learn more about Milwaukee history, come on inside, and you can sign up for a membership or make a donation in any one of the jars. Please follow us on our Facebook page for future events. If anyone has any questions, we are happy to entertain them. Thank you all.